Hi everybody and welcome to my channel. Today this is part 2 of the fall season sew along, and we will be sewing a bow and a dinner plate cozy. I'll be leaving the measurements of the supplies in the description box below, and also this is a sneak preview of my next video. We're going to be sewing a pumpkin pot holder, and it's also made out of scrap fabrics. Well, let's get started and I'll show you how it's done. And for making the bow cozy, you can also use layer cakes. They measure out 10 inches square, but today I'm using my scrap fabric, so each of my squares, they measure 5 1/4. And if you're using directional fabric, make sure they're in the same direction. And now we're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then I'm going to be ironing my seams open. And then with right sides together, match up your seam and then pin on each side. We're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then once sewn, I'm going to iron my seams open. And now it's time to add your four patch onto your batting. Also, I wanted to show you the cotton batting that I get at Hobby Lobby. It is 100% natural cotton. It's called Wrap and Zap. If you're not a quilter but you'd like to do these smaller projects, it's the perfect size. And now we're going to be drawing diagonal lines on our four patch. And this is just optional, but I like to pin. And now I like to increase my stitch length to a 3.0 and stitch on the lines. Now we're going to prepare the block for our darts. First, fold the fabric in half, and you can either use clips or pins. And then, very important, we don't want any of our fabric to be creased, so we turn it on its side, place our finger inside the cotton, and make sure there's no puckering. And then from the folded side, we're going to measure 2 inches, and then on the other side, 1 inch. And then repeat on the opposite side, and then we're going to be drawing our diagonal line. And then unclip and do the exact same thing on the opposite side and then on the other block as well. And then we're going to be sewing onto the line and reinforce stitching in the beginning and the end of your stitching. And be sure to double check that your fabric is still smooth and not bunched up. And then we're going to be trimming approximately up to 1/4 of an inch from our sewn line. And now we're going to be placing right sides together. We're going to match up our seams and pin. And now we're going to be drawing a couple of lines approximately 1 inch away from the edge and also the seam line, and that's in between there. We're not going to sew. And now unpin and then clip your corners, but be very careful not to go through your stitching. And now it's time to turn the bow cozy right side out. What I like to do is to insert my thumb to the furthest corner and then use my fingers, press onto my thumb, and start pushing it through the hole. Once I can grab it, then I just pull it out. It's a little bit tight, but not too bad. And then first I use my fingers to go to the corner, and then I'm going to be using a dowel rod. And then first what I like to do is kind of finger press to kind of smooth out the seams. And then also in the opening, I tuck in the fabric and the batting. Use my finger press as well. And then I'm going to iron, and then we're going to sew with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And I do begin sewing where the opening is. Be sure to back stitch. And I'm also using a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And then also, when you get to the seam line, keep your needle inserted, raise up your presser foot, pivot, and continue to sew. Now our bow cozy is complete. Let's start on the dinner plate cozy. The batting and the cotton fabric are cut into 13.5-inch squares. And then I place the cotton fabric onto the batting. And now we're going to be drawing diagonal lines. I chose to go ahead and draw my lines on the batting so it would be easier for you guys to see. And then the next step is we're going to sew on the drawn lines. And now it's time to prepare for our darts. We're going to be using the same technique as we did with the bow cozy, except that our measurements are going to be changing. On the folded part, we're going to be measuring 3 inches and then just a 1/2 inch on the opposite side. And now connect your 2 lines, and that's going to be our sewing line for our darts. Unfold and repeat on the opposite side in your other block. Now trim. And now we're going to be placing right sides together. As you can see here, this fabric is sort of like a cheater panel for quilting, and it does have a direction to it. So what I need to do is make sure they're in the same direction. And now we're going to match our seams and pin. Now we're going to be marking approximately 1 inch away from the seam line and about 1 to 1.5 inches away from the corner there, and in between those 2 lines we're not going to sew, and then we're going to sew with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And now trim your corners. Be careful not to go through your stitching. And now it's time to turn it right side out. What I like to do is put my thumb there in the corner and then use my fingers and press it through. And then once it's poking out of the turning hole there, I just grab and pull. And first I'm going to use my fingers for the corner, and then I'm going to use a dowel rod. Now we're going to top stitch approximately 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and be sure to reinforce your stitching at the beginning and the end of your stitching. Well, I hope you enjoyed the tutorials. They're super fun, fast, and easy to make. And I'm just going to show you real quick that my plate is an average plate. It measures approximately 10.5 inches wide. And also, be sure to tune in next week. We're going to be doing a pumpkin pot holder. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. Happy sewing, and see you next time.